Welcome to the demo on the table saw. We will be going over parts and procedures and safe practices on the table saw, and by the end of this demo you will know how to use the table saw safely. Getting to know your saw. If you look on the right, it shows different numbers that correspond to the picture. Number 1 talks about the tabletop. That's where all the work is done. Number 3 shows you the guard assembly. Number 4 shows you the table insert that surrounds the blade. Number 5 shows the elevation hand wheel at the front that raises and lowers the blade. Number 6 is the tilt hand wheel that tilts the blade from side to side. Number 9 shows you that the on-off switch is located on the left side. We will be going over some of these other parts later in the demo. Shown here is the elevation hand wheel. This is what raises and lowers the blade. Shown here is the tilt hand wheel. This is what you turn to angle the blade. This is the main power switch. If you notice, there is a start-stop paddle on the left. The main power switch has the yellow piece in the right-hand corner. The main power switch will always remain on. The start-stop paddle is what you use to turn off and on the machine. To turn it on, gently pull the paddle out. And to turn it off, simply push it in. In this picture, I want you to notice the rip fence located in the right-hand side of the table saw. This is a very important piece to understand what it does. It's meant to be locked into place at the desired width of the piece that you want to cut. It slides side to side when the red handle is in the up position. To lock it in, press it down. In woodworking, a rip cut is cutting with the grain. This device is called a rip fence. You will be making all rip cuts using the rip fence. Never make a cross cut using the rip fence. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up and safely make a cut on the saw. I use the wheel in the front to raise and lower the blade to about 1/8 of an inch above the board. Next thing I will do is move the rip fence to the desired width of the cut that I would like to make. You can use the ruler on the side of the rip fence to help you lock it into position of the width that you need. I also like to use the mark on my board that I made prior to make sure that the fence is locked where it needs to be. The next thing I'll do is set the guard down. Always have the guard covering the blade. Once everything is locked into position, I will go ahead and set my board up against the edge of the rip fence. The edge of my board must remain against my rip fence at all times. I will use my left hand to hold the board up against the rip fence. My right hand will push it through. What I'm going to do now is turn the machine on and hold the board down with my left hand and against the fence while using my right hand to guide the board slowly through the machine. Also note that when I cut this board, I want to pass it all the way through the machine and not leave it in between the blade and the fence. This could cause kickback. This angle is going to show you how the rip fence and the board's relationship are very important. To avoid kickback, you want to make sure that the board is always against the edge of the fence. Pass it all the way through and over the edge. Sometimes students will pass it halfway and let go, assuming that it's been cut. This is when kickback can occur. Kickback is something that happens when a board comes away from the fence or when it's not pushed all the way over the edge. I want to show you how a cut will look from this angle. So as you can see from this angle, my left hand holds the board down and against the fence. My right hand slowly guides the board through. nice and even, pushing it all the way past the back of the saw. Also note where I'm standing in relation to the blade. I am not standing behind the blade just because if kickback were to occur, you're not going to want to be standing in that area. I also am waiting for the blade to stop completely before grabbing the scrap piece of wood on the left-hand side. You can also make a crosscut on the table saw. What you'll have to do is push the rip fence all the way to the side, as this will not be a part of the operation. You will use this device here. This is called a miter gauge. A miter gauge is used to fit in the track on the top of the table saw, and the board will be butted up against the front of the device. Use this device only to make a crosscut, never a rip cut. This picture shows how the miter gauge fits in the track on the top of the table saw. The operator's hands are on the red handle and on top of the board. Once you have everything lined up, simply pass it over the blade, making your cut. So here I'm going to show you how to actually make a cut using the miter gauge. There I'm trying to line up the blade to make sure it's high enough. I'll set the guard down. And once you have everything lined up with the mark on your board, you'll go ahead and turn the machine on. But make sure that you don't have your fingers in front and keep them on top of the board. Slowly pass the board over the blade, making sure you go at a nice even pace and not letting it slide back and forth. You'll turn the machine off, wait for the blade to stop, and then you can retrieve your piece of scrap wood on the side, but not until that blade is stopped. So now you've been shown how to use the table saw to make a rip cut and a cross cut. There might be some times where you'll have to make a cut that is less than 4 inches. That's where a push stick or push block comes into play. The two at the top are push sticks. The one on the bottom is a push block. The two push sticks at the top allow you to push a board through the machine if the board that you are cutting is less than 4 inches. If the board that you are cutting is 4 inches or greater, you can simply just use your hand. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to use a push block or a push stick. First, I'll set my fence to the desired opening, which in this case is about 1.5 inches, and I'll go ahead and set the guard down. I will get my push stick ready to cut my 1.5 inch wide piece, and I will have it to the side. You can see here I can use this push stick, but it might be better to use a longer, thinner one in this case, like this. Before I make my cut, I'll make sure everything is ready at my dispense. So what I'm going to do here is turn the machine on. I have my push stick ready on the side. I'll pass the board slowly through the machine. And once I get the end of the board to the back of the machine, there is when I'm going to need that push stick. And I won't switch hands. I'll keep the push stick in my right hand all the way through, and I'll pass that board all the way over the end of the table. Again, I want to remind you that you need to wait for that blade to stop completely before reaching for that scrap piece of wood. So now that you know the basic way to make some cuts on the table saw, there are some general rules that you'll need to know. 1. Never reach over the blade to retrieve a piece of wood. 2. 4 inches is the minimum width to be pushed through by hand. 3. 10 inches is the minimum length for ripping a board on the table saw. 4. Use the 3-tooth rule when setting the height of the blade, which is about 1/8 of an inch. 5. Be sure the rip fence is locked before turning the saw on. 6. Stand to the right of the blade while pushing the board through to avoid getting hit with kickback. 7. Always push the workpiece all the way past the end of the table. 8. Keep the table free of tools and wood at all times. Do not clutter the table saw. 9. Always keep a safe distance when waiting to use the saw. Allow the person using the saw to have space. 10. Always keep the blade guard on. 11. Never remove scrap wood while the saw is still running. If you follow these rules and the demos in this video, I'm sure you'll have a good experience using the table saw.